Hello and welcome to Caesar and Sartre. This is episode 2, and we're continuing our discussion on Nietzsche, this time focusing on the controversy over his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, and how that related to his field at the time, which was classical philology. Um, I'm going to let Will take it away because he was the one who actually did research, so he's the expert. I'm the student.
Hardly. So yeah, I mean, the book is, um, how does one put it? It's something. It's the book, like just like going through the book a little. It's like
By the book, you're referring to
the birth of tragedy.
just
Um, from uh, what is it, like the birth of tragedy from music or something? I forget the subtitle, but yeah, it's uh I mean, it's really more philosophy than philology, which I think is fascinating for all kinds of reasons. I think it really, at its core, it kind of represents like an older approach to the classics than what was going on in Germany at the time, which we'll get more into that later whenever we start talking about Ulrich von Wilhelm Moritz Mollendorf. That's a whole thing. But so the introduction to the book, it's written by Nietzsche's sister. We talked about her a little bit last week. She's infamous for Nazifying Nietzschean philosophy. Um, there's lots of just the introduction is just funny, so I think it's worth looking at just some of the things she said, just cause. Um, what one of the first things, like it's like page 3 of the introduction. She mentions the Polish descent thing, which I think we talked about a little bit.
yeah,
He is almost certainly not actually of Polish descent.
he is not.
And
He is a steady German stock.
she, she writes, "My brother often refers to his Polish descent, and in later years he even instituted research work with the view of establishing it, which met with partial success. I know nothing definite concerning these investigations," which uh, is uh, and like, I mean, while that's just like kind of funny, that she's like dunking on his desperate attempt to de-Germanize himself. um, uh, I have to wonder, given her political project, if it isn't also like she can't diss him that hard, but it also reads to me like she's trying to distance him uh, from like the Polish association, because I mean she she wants him to be very German for her audience, I guess. You know, she's her Nazification project. I guess it's kind of it feels. I can't prove that that's the reason she's doing this, but it feels like it's wrapped up in that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's. I think it's. People look at those passages Nietzsche wrote, and they're like, what the hell, dog? This makes no sense. Like, what are you doing here? Um,
yeah,
I mean, part of it, Nietzsche's just he's a literary guy. He's a master of style. So he'll play with like characters. He'll play with voices. He'll say things on one page and then say something different on another page. So that's might have been part of it. Um, just
well, now
drawing,
wait. I feel like we kind of
drawing on.
clashed on that particular point a little bit last week, right? I'm pretty sold on the idea that he was sort of a sort of a, what's the term, um, provocateur, I guess, in the way he's writing. Like, he, his uh, the the all manners of devilry and such. Like, it seems interesting to me, I guess. You seem to be sort of in alignment on my position there now.
I mean, I see it more, I guess, as a change of subject in a way. I mean, I think that the point I made about, I guess, this devilry comment, I do think he was being serious with his. This is not about classics at all. This is about pure
philosophy.
But okay. I thought he was being serious about the point that he does believe the higher man will do good things, bad things, and he's okay with that. He doesn't have a problem with that. He's not just saying it to like provoke his audience. Although there are aspects of Nietzsche where he is provoking his audience too. So I mean, he's a multifaceted author. So he sometimes is a provocateur, but you kind of have to parse out
sure.
when he is, when he isn't. The thing I wanted to say about like the Polish comments, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a kind of germifying. That's not a word. He's distancing himself from his German roots. He doesn't like German culture.
Right. Well, I don't know if I would say he doesn't like German culture. I mean, he definitely does. He's like, and this is going to be very relevant later, but he's Richard Wagner's like #1 fanboy.
Well, but okay, you have to remember this is he's using Wagner as an example. So he's using Wagner as an example of what he thinks, German culture could be. So to that extent, he is still distancing himself from German culture because he's criticizing Germany constantly in his work.
Sure.
In fact, he says, I think it's in the his last book, Ecce Homo, where he talks about one thing he like praises about the birth of tragedy is how un-Germanic it is, and he thinks that's a virtue.
I think that's interesting because something I kept like jotting down in my notes for this is how very, very German the birth of tragedy is. It has to be one of the most German things I have read, and that's saying something because I read it in translation and I've read German. It's still significantly more German than some of that stuff. It's incredible. It's just like I mean, I know you've read some Marx. It reads a lot like Marx, actually. It's very like winding, impossible to get to what the actual point of what he's talking about is. It's yeah.
I think what he meant, like, so that comment about being very un-German. He also, like in that same passage, he says his book is very indifferent to politics. So I think what he's saying with that passage was, well, this book is like, I guess, it's not timely. It's not focused on like, he's not doshing off an op-ed about some contemporary news story. He's talking about these bigger matters that he thinks his fellow countrymen aren't talking about or writing about.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but again, that's I feel like a very German approach to this sort of thing. Germans, like in German philosophy, it feels like they're always very concerned with like big ideas as opposed to nitty gritty application based sort of things.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean, how German we want to think of Nietzsche. I mean, you could probably make the argument, he was more German than he wanted to admit. I mean, both ethnically and culturally. I think what I'm trying to add is I do think he thinks of himself as in defiance of, in contradiction of.
Right. Yeah.
German culture.
Absolutely, yes. I wasn't arguing with you. I just think it's funny that he is like he's very convinced of how he's really real bucking the trends, really rejecting the flow of German thought, when in fact he's perhaps one of the most German thinkers to have ever thought.
I mean, he was a good like cosmopolitan in a way. He thought he wanted to be allied with a kind of humanity that's above the petty squabbles of nation states.
Sure.
But I think we got a bit sidetracked. I know there was
Yes, we did.
a couple quotes you wanted.
We're stereotyping
More
Germans.
quotes you
That's
wanted.
what we got hung up on, episode 2.
You're just
So,
so many. I feel like if the people that are going to get clipped and shipped, it's going to be you, not me.
oh, definitely, yeah. That's just what I do. Um, so yeah, okay. So, and we talked about Wagner for a second, and Nietzsche's sister uh, in the introduction, she makes a point of his infatuation with Wagner's works, and I use that word with its full force. He's like, I, I don't think I know of a person who has ever written so fawningly over Wagner. Not because Wagner's not good, but just like he has like an obsession with the man, and it features heavily in the book. Um, he's sort of concerned with this whole idea. She says he can only regard his works and views as an expression of the artist's whole being, despite the fact that he by no means understood every one of those works at that time. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, actually, because I'm not 100% sure of what she means by that.
I wonder. This is just speculation, but looking at that passage, it makes me think because Nietzsche did break with Wagner. You know, as often happens when you like
Sure.
when you're hero worshiping someone, there comes a point where your hero disappoints you, and there's
Yeah.
a process of disillusionment, to be like Freudian about it. So he does break away with Wagner eventually. I mean, yes, he does have like this. I think I described it as a man crush last episode, but he's intoxicated by Wagner and his works, um, and so I'm wondering if um, what his sister's referring to is the aspects of his work of Wagner's work that were Christian, the aspects that were like anti-Semitic, the aspects that Nietzsche, the reasons he broke with Wagner. If she sees them as more important in Wagner's works than, and it sees Nietzsche as downplaying that. That's a speculation, of course. I don't know what's going on in her head.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I was just curious to see what you would say about that. I just think it's a very interesting claim. At any rate, then she claims that science, art, and philosophy developed and became ever more closely related in him until, in the birth of tragedy, they brought forth a, quote, centaur, unquote, which is a very interesting metaphor, I think. Um, Apparently, he uses this metaphor for um, an achievement that you get by multiple talents, basically, which I think is kind of at the root of the conflict with this particular work. It's and again, really more important later. But Villamovitz is sort of when he and others are sort of like laying the groundwork for what will become uh, classical philology as it exists. They're very concerned with what they call scientific inquiry. I would call that questionable terminology, but that was sort of in the air in German intellectual circles generally. You get things like scientific socialism,
I mean,
scientific everything needs to be scientific, even when it doesn't really mean scientific all that much.
This is like I guess grammatical question then. So when you're saying classicists at the time wanted to be scientific, do you mean in the sense of just like a body of knowledge, or do you mean in the sense of the natural sciences? Because the word has changed meaning.
Yes, is what I would say to that. They want it to be. They're trying to construct a mode of scientific inquiry into the use of language.
Yeah.
Which is sort of where we get like linguistics now. This is really a lot of they also do quite a bit of the groundwork for like linguistics as it developed. There's a whole bunch of archaeological expeditions happening at this time, which is very relevant. Um, the quest to try to find the original Indo-Europeans, which did ultimately happen, much to the chagrin of the Germans, it was not found anywhere near the Nords. It was actually in southern Russia. But anyway, yeah, it's so there's yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but it's they want it to be scientific, and it's not really possible to make it scientific in the way that they want it to be. I think is sort of a way of answering that. They want it to be as many other fields want to be, like history is doing a lot of this at the same time. The 19th, 20th century German circles, they're trying to make, I guess, what you would call like a historist approach. They want history to be such that you can find natural laws that govern it, and thereby you can predict the future from history. Is kind of the idea, and
Okay.
philologists are kind of trying to do the same thing, basically. They're trying to find natural laws which govern language.
Yeah. No,
It's
that's very helpful. That's a
yeah,
that's a helpful
and
answer to me.
yeah, I mean, the fruits of this have been sometimes very good, sometimes highly questionable. But at this time, you get people like Villamovitz who are like really, really fixated on this. In part because it's a new field. That tends to happen. You
They're
get
trying
like
to
real
establish themselves.
crusaders out there for it. Um, but yeah, so but yeah, so anyway, this is kind of, I think she actually hits the nail on the head with this section. Like it is a very polyphonic book. It doesn't really like um, it doesn't ever confine itself to one field. It's hopping around a lot between um, art and philosophy, and she says science. I don't really think it does a whole lot with like science in any conception we would understand. But yeah, at any rate, um, concerning the birth of tragedy, this is from a note which she publishes here. One of his unpublished notes before this, she pulled it out of a dusty cupboard somewhere, presumably, but says concerning the birth of tragedy, a book consisting of mere experiences relating to the pleasurable and unpleasurable aesthetic states, with a metaphysico-artistic background, which is, I think, it sums it up by being really confusing, because that's kind of the book, honestly. Um, the he's very a lot of the book focuses on aesthetics, but like very much centered on how he views aesthetics without like yeah. Um,
Yeah, I
so
mean it's
that kind of I think irons out most of what's interesting about the introduction to it. Um, then or at least her introduction. There's also a section which he does some introducing. Of course, there's the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. We kind of talked about that last week, but it's the uh, uh, I'm trying. I don't actually remember who coined these terms as they exist in this. Is it Schopenhauer? I can't remember. Um, but regardless, it's Apollo is of course associated with the creation of poetry itself by the Greeks, and people like Nietzsche tend to associate him with reason, intellect, order, the way uh, it's about bringing the ideas from your mind into a literary work, kind of. And then, of course, the Dionysian is sort of it's orgiastic, it's wild, it's nonsensical. We it's almost hedonistic, I guess. This again, very German way of thinking. It's a set of binary opposites, almost Hegelian. And
Nietzsche says this about.
basically his whole thing with this is that this thesis and antithesis, the Apollonian and Dionysian, give us the synthesis, which is tragedy, and it's yeah.
I was just gonna add Nietzsche. Nietzsche says this about the birth of tragedy as well in the passage about it being un-Germanic. He says it's offensively Hegelian.
Yes. um, yeah, that's a funny bit.
Which, I mean, Hegelianism in general is offensive to me, but that's a side tangent.
We'll have to do it. We'll have to do a day on Hegel one day. I think that would be.
Hegel is one of those philosophers I like making fun of. I'm not saying like like obviously I wouldn't say he literally contributed nothing. Like he contributed plenty. A lot of Hegelians I don't. I mean, I'm not sympathetic to. Sorry, it's a side tangent. I'm not sympathetic to like idealism in general usually. So I'm a lot of Hegelianism seems very like a lot of metaphysical gobbledygook.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a Marxist, so that makes sense. I don't think any of us are in love with Hegel, and yet we can't help but refer to Hegelian ideas simultaneously.
Well,
we're
yeah.
always caught on that.
I mean, Marx, Marx was influenced by Hegel, so you can't get away from it if you think Marx said anything right.
Yeah, it always comes up.
Although I tend to disagree with his Hegelian understanding of history, but that's also off topic.
But yeah, anyway, this sort of pseudo Hegelian synthesis of the Apollonian and Dionysian aspects of literature, and especially of tragedy. Nietzsche kind of construes this idea that it's like a rejection of the wisdom of Silenus. Silenus is supposed to have been the tutor of the god Dionysus, and he's famous for having supposedly said, in effect, life isn't worth living. The dead are happy. Don't speak ill of the dead because they're actually having a better time than you. Is sort of his whole shtick. He gets described as anti-natalist, which I guess is probably true to an extent, but really he's like almost pro-mortalist. He's like, yeah, actually, like you're gonna be better off dead. And basically, Nietzsche suggests that tragedy is the refutation of that. People come to enjoy it, and they enjoy it because, they're engaged with all the catharsis and everything. They're engaged with the emotional qualities of it. It gives you, and it also the sort of intellectual aspects of it at the same time. All of the things which are contradictory to one another that make life worth living exist in tragedy, in his conception.
So he does he does sort of echo Aristotle, I guess, in a way, about the catharsis.
Yes, he does.
Experience through tragedy. Okay.
Yeah, he definitely does a little bit. Which, I mean, I think basically anybody who studies tragedy or theater broadly, especially in an ancient context, we can't escape. Very much like it's hard to escape Hegel, it's very hard to escape Aristotle. Because I think his conception of catharsis is just so profound. It's kind of hard to get away from.
Yeah, I mean, if if someone gets a theater degree, they're going to read the Poetics. That's just how it is.
It comes up. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So that's sort of his main shtick. You also see a lot of his early anti-Christian thinking appearing here. In chapter 5, he notes from the very first, Christianity was essentially and thoroughly the nausea and surfeit of life for life, the Sabbath of Sabbaths, all this as also the unconditional will of Christianity to recognize only moral values has always appeared to me as the most dangerous and ominous possible forms of a will to perish. In effect, he contends that the real that tragedy kind of represents the best of Greek culture because it's like a rejection of the the Christianizing influences that would come later, which sort of Christianity does to an extent glorify the life after death. Tragedy at it gives you all of the things that make life worth living now are there. It rejects the Selenian idea. Life isn't worth living and you should just die because it gives you everything that life is worth living for. Uh, and yeah, you get this sort of uh, which he can this Christian idea of will to perish. Things will be better after you're dead, so might as well not live. I think that's kind of a straw man of basically all Christian positions. Although there are certainly a few Christians who have gone that far in the philosophical tradition, by and large, they tend to uh, conceive of life as worth living uh, because of what will come after, rather than suggesting that life is not worth living because what will come after is better.
Okay, I did have something I wanted to say about the Christian bits, but I don't know if you want to get your thought out first.
No, it's good. What is it?
So, as a budding classicist yourself, what you were talking about made me think of Slavoj Žižek, the Slovenian philosopher.
Never heard of him.
He's a very obscure figure in critical theory, kind of like Lacan, Derrida. Anyway, he makes this claim multiple times, and I don't know. It seems a little. I'm a little bit skeptical of it, but it's an interesting idea. He claims like the Greeks had a very different relationship to their gods than we do, in like say Christians do, in that they didn't believe in them as much as we believe in our gods. They weren't as concerned with their gods as we are with our God. And there was
I can imagine a post-critical theorist would think of that.
this goes back. I guess this goes to the idea of they emphasize this earth, whereas Christians emphasize the world beyond. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like I said, historically that seems a bit dubious to me, but I'm curious what you.
Extremely dubious. I'm sorry. I like Zizek generally, but this is just like not a very well thought out take, to be honest.
Sometimes I think he engages with things at a superficial level, but
which I mean is fine. He's not a classicist, so I don't really expect him to be that deeply invested. But it does. This is one issue with like ancient religion that does really. It's a thing for me. People have this conception that like people barely even like believed in their religion. This is very much the product, I think, of the French the critical theory people and stuff coming back to ancient religion and being like, see, like they didn't do the things we would expect religious people to do, so that means they must not have like cared. And I don't think that's true at all. The thing is that their religion just didn't work like ours, so it doesn't look like ours naturally.
I know we've mentioned before that they didn't quite. Oh, how did you put it? Ancients tended to be, at least in certain instances, more tolerant. Like they were less tolerant in the sense of less interested in, I guess, converting other people to their
I'm
God?
going to stop you right there because
Okay.
that isn't really how it worked at all. This is the problem, I think, with a lot of this thinking. There's this idea that there were like distinct religions that like existed in different places, and maybe to an extent you could make that argument, but like our conception of what religion is has basically been molded by Christianity. Christianity conceives of itself as like a religion unto itself, and outside of it are other religions which are all wrong. So it needs to change them to be like it. Um, Religion in the at least in the Roman conception, that's really what I'm most familiar with. But is not the term means to bind back. It's the things that restrain you. Um, you it's basically religio uh, is a set of things that you do in relationship to deities. It's not so much like it's orthopraxist, you could say, and there's an extent to which that kind of captures it, but it's like um, I don't know. I think that there's a really strong tendency with a lot of modern scholars, especially people outside of my field who love to hop into it, to give their completely unwarranted perspectives on the way ancient people lived. The reality is, most of them clearly did, to some extent, believe in the existence of deities who had a very direct impact on their life. I would actually argue, in a lot of ways, much more so than Christians generally conceive of God or Jesus impacting their life day to day.
I was going to say, so is it more that it's less maybe identity based in a way? Like there are these gods, and you're to some extent bound to them with like sacrifices and whatnot, but it's not necessarily a whole identity crafted around it. Whereas there's more of that in Christianity, or am I still?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. It's like Christians tended to create an identity sort of around their relationship to God, whereas to the Romans the gods are so like what's the word, they're so pervasive in daily life. There's no identity around that just is. I mean, it's like having an identity based on the fact that you live under the sky, like so does everybody else.
They have a more real cosmology almost. They have a more real picture. The ancients,
Right, I would say so, yeah.
of gods.
I think especially moderns
That's
have a
that. Yeah.
very like strange relationship to religion. That's basically like, I mean, even within like Christian history is very new. Like most Christians today are basically they're atheists for all gods except theirs. They don't believe in other gods.
Yeah.
Christians like prior to like 1800 believed other gods existed. They were just demons. They were evil, but they existed generally. That was kind of the conception. This like so yeah. I mean, just like our entire relationship to the divine kind of doesn't really exist in the same way anymore.
Okay,
But
I was curious about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's something I like talking about a lot,
So
as you can tell.
I guess like connecting it back to Nietzsche, then I guess so he was just falling for or perpetuating this like almost modern understanding of. Wait, no, sorry, never mind. I had a thought, but I don't think it makes sense.
Okay. But I think he in a lot of ways, I think he gets a lot right about like the way Christianity kind of functions. I don't agree with his perspective that if you believe Christianity, you have to like accept like a desire to perish. Though I think that's a bit in usual Nietzschean fashion. He's probably correct on some basic level, but he is taking his he's taking it and running, and he's just running wherever he wants to.
Well,
Let me think.
I guess that might be connected to the idea that back to like slave and master morality that I guess Christians are
Yes, it is
negating life.
Absolutely, yes.
Negating life in the sense that they're negating. They're moralists. There's so much activity that they're negating Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, you're, you're, what is it? Oh, I was going to drop a Bible quote and it's gone. It just exited my mind. But yeah, it's the idea. Your treasures are stored up in heaven, right? Like there's why you aren't here to live for this life. You're here to live for what's after. Which, of course, in Nietzsche's conception is ridiculous, and you are wasting your one life. And he kind of conceives of sort of he conceives of tragedy as the rejection of that sort of thinking, and he loves that. And then he kind of and this is also sort of a source of consternation for Vilimovitz, who we're about to get to, I promise. He blames a lot of this on Socrates. Um, for reasons that I don't totally understand. I mean, he's concerned with the like he. I guess a lot of it is he doesn't like Socrates' rationalism, kind of. It's I don't know. I feel like you would have more to say on that. That section kind of confuses me a little bit.
So I think Nietzsche's emphasis is on action.
Sure.
And like, I think he can see thinking as kind of suppressed action in a way.
Right.
And so I guess you have someone like Socrates who's, going around,
always thinking, does nothing but thinking,
going around, always thinking, asking annoying questions,
questioning people into aporia.
Right. Whereas, I mean, that seems very different, I think, from Nietzsche's ideal of, I don't know, like an Alexander the Great that's just going out there and conquering the world, half the known world.
That makes sense. I would agree with that, I think. Not with Nietzsche's conception, but with your understanding of it. That seems to make sense to me.
Yes, and that's where I think, I mean, he keeps accusing everyone under the sun of negating life, but that would be to the extent to which someone like Socrates is a decadent who's negating life, I think.
Which kind of brings us into Vilimovitz, who, he is something of a Socrates fan. He's very, very mad about this book for all kinds of reasons. First, the title, Zukunftsphilologie. I can't remember if German can have the soft G in Philologie or not. Sorry. So that's as good as it's getting. But it literally just means like future philology. It's the title of the play. You can read you can read Postel et al. In their translation. They have a wonderful little section on just the title because it's pretty fascinating. It's apparently a play on Wagner's Zukunftsmusik. It's clearly pejorative. And it may have a kind of sense of it built into it. It's like something based on nothing in the Zukunft. I'm not sure I buy that, but I'm not a Germanist, so I'll lay my thoughts on that aside. I'm sure they know better than me. Whatever it is, Vilimovitz is at least within the field maybe the most famous philologist ever. Literally, he's definitely up there. He's kind of as we talked about earlier, he's kind of like around this time he and others are really like laying the groundwork for philology as it will become, trying to scientize it, rationalize it. And he opens with this quote from Aga 17 from Aristophanes, who is he's like for those who don't know, he's like pretty much the only surviving old comedy that we have in Greek literary history. That it's still extant. But he opens with this quote: "Condiments, vinegar, piquant seasonings, scallions, beets, highly refined sauces, leaves stuffed with brains, oregano, delicacies for a catamite compared to a good hunk of meat. And this kind of colors his entire critique of the book. Um, uh, um, yeah, he sort of he thinks of the book as all fluff and no meat, sort of the idea. Um, it, yeah, we have this bit. If eternal truths, which here he's talking about the Nietzsche's construction of the Apollonian and Dionysian. So if these eternal truths turn out to be quite transitory, hazy constructions, the whole edifice that rests upon them obviously vanishes into thin air. And yeah, I mean, he kind of he tears into those as ideas at all. Um, he thinks it's just a very silly, simplistic way of understanding Greek literature. Um, he mocks the idea that Socrates ruined tragedy. He starts out saying, "I would love to deserve the insult of being a Socratic man," which is how Nietzsche begins after he introduces this idea. He begins terming people who uh, uh, non-actors is, I guess, a good way of describing that. People who stop living in the moment, start doing all that thinking. Um, uh, and Most of the tone of this article is just extremely sarcastic. It's very aggressive. It's very.
You're in the wrong career then.
I know, really. I was reading something kind of like this. I was writing a brief paper on what was it? It was like intertext between Greek and Roman lyric. This is not something I normally research, nor do I like it at all. I think lyric is terrible to read most of the time. Glad some people enjoy it though. But I was doing a paper on that, and I remember there's a very famous scholar of ancient Greek from like the 1950s. I've read some of his commentaries, and there was a modern scholar like 2010 or something who was commenting on it, and he was like, yeah, in his usual dismissive style, he like they like tore into him for this section where like was talking about the metaphor of the ship of state in Archilochus actually. um, and like the older scholar used the term. He saw the term Basilius king, like 3 lines down, and he just like mentioned that it was there and said it didn't matter, and he didn't make any argument for that. I mean, it was a very bizarrely dismissive section. I agreed with the second guy, but he was so mad. He was so mad. Anyway, um, but yeah, philology is filled with this kind of thing. There's so much. It continues today, but I do feel like back in the day they got way angrier about it. Most of the time now it's like a pache. That's like the greatest kind of disrespect. Pache being like I don't know. Is that a thing that people do in philosophy?
Apache?
Pache, yeah. It's Italian for peace. But it's like you would say it to like a dog or a child who's acting up.
Um, I wasn't familiar with this term.
Yeah. Well, it gets used in philology a lot whenever people just like want to diss somebody and move on. It basically it means, yeah, I read what you had to say on this and I think it was stupid, so I'm just not even going to address it. I'm just going to let you know that I read it, so that way you can't write an article later saying I wish you had integrated my thoughts. I read it. It was dumb. Moving on. Yeah, that's like the highest form of disrespect. I had a professor a few years ago who once said, "Once you get a pache in somebody's bibliography, you know that you've made it."
Right. Right.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, the whole article is mostly just like him like aggressively like tearing into. The thing is, I feel like he doesn't really have that much of an argument. Like, I don't even disagree with him. It's kind of hard to really like make out like if he even has a point at all. He mostly just like attacks Nietzsche's like fundamental way of dealing with it, which I guess is kind of the issue, right? Like, while philology is, as we understand it, is kind of an emergent field, we're very focused on facts and very focused on trying to rationalize the study of language. You get somebody like Nietzsche who comes along, who I think kind of deals with philological subjects very much more in like an 18th century kind of way, where he's like, yeah, this is great literature, and here's why it like speaks to the human spirit or whatever. Let me construct my entire worldview around this now.
So what it makes me think of is, so Nietzsche wrote an essay on the uses and abuses of history, a history for.
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, on the use and abuse of history for life. And so because the disagreement with I'm going to mispronounce his name horribly, but Wilamowitz.
Wilamowitz. Yeah, that's the guy.
Wilamowitz. So it makes me think like, so it's not just I mean, it's partly a disagreement about the source material, but it also seems to me potentially a disagreement on like what the use of history is or the value of history is.
Right. Yeah.
Wilamowitz isn't the historian as such, but like, so well, on the use and abuse of history for life, Nietzsche's critical of the attitude towards history that is just like the collection of facts, the rest of facts, the kind of history you have, the kind of history professors are doing, say.
Sure.
And like what Nietzsche wants is a engagement with history that allows us to take lessons from history and think about and use history as a way of thinking about how we ourselves ought to live our lives.
Right.
So it's funny. It's almost a moment where Nietzsche is himself becoming a bit moralistic, but this controversy seems partly about that. I could be reading into it.
No, I think you're on the money with that. Yeah, that's sort of. I think Wilamowitz is very mad to see somebody like in his mind regressing to this sort of backwards way of thinking about literature. What we should be thinking about is how many times the term Basileon appears in fucking whatever. Like it's very he's very concerned with rationalizing this new emergent field. Nietzsche is, while he is a philologist, he's like, hey, literature also has like uses that we can like we can do things outside of just looking at like words and argument construction. Like,
yeah,
like I think in this way, like I think Nietzsche kind of won in a weird way. Like, nobody in philology really talks about Nietzsche anymore, but I think in this sense, this isn't like the main thing we do in philology, but like I think this criticism ultimately did kind of get taken to heart. Whether it was Nietzsche's influence, probably not, but it is interesting. I think we see a lot more of that kind of thing anymore. But yeah, and I mean, certainly in a cultural sense, I think, like broader society, I think Nietzsche definitely won here.
Well, Nietzsche's a more of a commonly known name than
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like Wilamowitz is interested in history and literature for its own sake, for what it can, what the specialists can say about it.
Right. Yeah. I think it's kind of this sort of scholar versus humanist thing.
I think it's
I
a way of
think
putting
Nietzsche.
it.
That's those are terms that get thrown around a lot in our circles, and I think this is very much a scholar versus humanist. Nietzsche is approaching Euripides as a humanist, and uh, Vilimovitz very much as a scholar.
Yeah. I think Nietzsche's approaching Greek literature in the way that, like, an 18th century man of letters would do it, a bit more
Right.
casually for like
Yeah.
didactic or philosophical purposes.
I think like, and I've interacted with a lot of people and talked with people in my field about this kind of thing. I find it kind of frustrating whenever people get like hung up on this divide. Like, you can't do either without the other. Like there's no point to what we do as scholars if none of this is valuable for life. Like then we're just like doing it just because, which, like, I don't know, it's kind of like kind of takes the wind out of my sails a little bit. I like the idea that, what I do like means something to other people whenever they're interacting with works of important literature. um, and like vice versa. Like, I mean, if you have a totally warped understanding of what the text ever said to begin with, then it won't really benefit you very much, I think.
I mean, this is why, and I realize like this sounds like a very old-fashioned opinion, but people will say, and there's some truth to it, that like the downfall of classical education was like a bad thing, and I guess they say it's a bad thing because they think that if you spend quite a few years learning to read Latin, write Latin, recite Latin, and it's sort of it's training your mind.
Yep.
It's allowing you to think critically, and then you can go off and do other, say, non-classical pursuits or classical pursuits. But um, it's a way of training students that some would argue is lost in the modern education system, which is more interested in um, oh, I don't know. I mean, trying to
Turning out good workers to make those widgets.
yeah, I was going to say trying to cover as many subjects as possible,
Right.
which I guess is the downside of more classical education, which was more limited in its subject matter. But that's the point side of that argument, anyway.
I mean, I agree with that. Yeah, there's you of course have heard me talk about this in the past. I'll spare you most of that, but it's yeah, I do think studying the classics, it's very good for your mind. It opens you up to a lot of like modes of thinking. I think the problem with education as it exists, well, one of many. I have a degree in education, so I can yammer on about that for a while. But I think one of the sort of biggest weaknesses is in its attempt to capture all of this like content, and I use that term with all of its rot of modernity sort of connotations, but it is very like in this attempt to just get information, like nobody is ever like learning really how to process, how to deal with that information anymore. um
I've noticed
and
myself. I've noticed this myself when I'm in like grading students' work. Like it's almost like maybe you'd call it scientism. I don't know, but it's like a lazy form of empiricism. Where
right,
like
yeah,
students will be like, we'll present some like essay, philosophical essay, and the student's response is, well, that's just not how it works. And then
yeah, no, no,
it's hard to respond to that because you're like, well, that's not the point, right? Maybe this is not how this works in real life, but the point is to think through these ideas and see if they have
right,
value and talk about them. So it can be hard, I think, to for us moderns maybe to um, we're so obsessed with, I guess, the concrete that the
right,
abstract
yeah.
kind of falls away.
Well,
And
I was
go
yeah,
ahead.
I fully agree. Yeah, well, I was gonna say like thinking back to like high school, like I could never like unt- like or back in middle school, I remember like getting started. This teachers like starting to ask like questions about like not just like the text of a passage, but like okay, now let's like think about like metaphors and stuff. And my brain didn't like understand that. Maybe I'm just like autistic or whatever. I'm sure there's an element of that. But like I had never really like learned how to like conceive of that at all. Like that didn't register with me. I was like, what do you mean? I know why the caged bird sings. Yeah, I mean, caged birds do sing sometimes. That does happen. People own birds; they sing. I had like I could not like conceive of what's going on there. And then I took Latin for a couple of years, and like the basic language stuff, it's useful for like constructing arguments. It's useful for like think if you ever want to like infuriate people, you can like pick apart like problems in the grammar, which ultimately reflect like logical flaws. It builds out. You gotta have a good grounding in grammar to understand logic. You do. But then like as we started to study like higher level stuff in Latin, we started like grappling with literature in a very different way. We were still doing that stuff, but it's also like you learn how to interrogate authors' purpose, authors' modes of thinking, which is really fun to do whenever your author hasn't been alive for a couple thousand years. It really forces you to like interrogate that on a deeper level, I think.
That's
But
funny.
yeah,
On the metaphor point, so like when I read, I'm trying to like read more. I've been reading some poetry recently, and sometimes like I feel like my brain just like shuts off because like I'm so used to reading prose where the author's
right.
like, I am going to argue X because blah blah
Yes.
blah, and it's so on the nose, like it's obvious what the author's writing about, right? And then you read some poetry and my brain's like, this makes no sense, and I have to like turn off
Read.
that part of my brain, and I'm like, wait, no, we're thinking imaginatively, we're thinking symbolically, and then only then am I able to like I think properly appreciate like a poem. But I have to like stop myself for a second and be like, this isn't literal. This is not a philosophy text.
Yeah.
This is not
Right.
an
Yeah.
argumentative essay, right? Shut that
Those
part of your brain
caged
off.
birds do be singing. um, I think honestly, if you're looking to like really train your brain to deal with like poetry broadly, I think, and I say this as somebody who's not like a huge fan of Virgil, um, another person who would make a great topic for an episode one day. And much to the chagrin of my advisor, I am not a huge Virgil fan. I'll read him, and I think I can read it and appreciate it like intellectually, and like I could see it and think like, yeah, that's like good literature. But like it's not like something I would read for fun most of the time. I think it can be rather dull at times. But I think if you're like really trying to like find a bridge between like prose and poetry, I think Virgil's kind of it. He's fantastic. If you're just like you're starting to really grasp the metaphors, but you really want to like you want to hone that in. I think he's a very good avenue for that, because he tends to make his metaphors like very vivid, but also like very explicit. It's very like once you start like dealing with it, and I noticed it a lot of my students this semester. I was teaching Virgil this semester. We were doing a little Aeneid, and they were like at first they were really struggling with some of it. Like there was this metaphor about like the uh, I'm trying to think. This is from the section. It's about the fall of Troy, and like it's describing the Greeks flooding into the citadel, and it describes them as being like a rushing torrent, carrying away cattle with the with their enclosures. And I don't know. I think like the way he uses language is very vivid, but it's also like once you start realizing what he's doing, it's pretty hard to like misconstrue. So I think it makes a very good bridge between like prose and like poetry, because it is poetic, but it's not like super lofty. It's dealing with wars mostly. So
That actually connects with Nietzsche, funny enough, because, well, for one, Nietzsche did actually write poetry, and I don't. The book might be in Kentucky. I know I bought a book which was a collection of Nietzsche's poetry he wrote from youth to death. Uh,
he would write poetry. I didn't even know he
but
wrote poetry, but that makes so much
well,
sense.
I bring it up because, like, so his work, thus spoke Zarathustra, thus spake Zarathustra. I mean, some people call it a philosophical novel. Some people also call it like a prose poem, because it is the prose is very poetic. It's very based on imagery, symbolism, and so I find that much. I mean, it's a beautifully written book. Like, if anyone who listening to this hasn't taken a look at it, I recommend you just flip to a random
Very
page
Lucretian of him.
and read it. And that's another work where I think the prose and poetry kind of
Right.
synthesize in a way to make it more readable.
Well, I think that's that kind of. Uh, I think that's kind of him drawing on his sort of pseudo ancient perspective on the world. Whereas we tend to think of our genres in literature as very like distinct, the ancients weren't like that really. I mean, they had genres, but like they bled over into one another very, very often. Rhetoric tended to use a bunch of poetic forms. History, much to the chagrin of modern ancient historians, often draws heavily on poetry and doesn't always reflect much of actual fact. Um, like, yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. I think that's interesting to hear because that's very much like him. Lucretius, of course, wrote De Rerum Natura, and like on the nature of things. Very wide ranging title to even go with, but like which is itself, it's an epic poem, but the hero of the epic is the philosopher Epicurus,
Sure.
and like the entire the poem is both simultaneous. There's a lot of people who like try to say, oh, well, it's basically just like it's just a philosophical treatise that he just wrote really hard because he thought it'd be funny. And like, no, it reads like a real poem, but it also deals mostly with philosophical themes. Like, you can do that. And I think that's something that it seems like Nietzsche's kind of drawing on that sort of way of thinking about literature. And I think it's kind of sad that we've lost that a little bit because I don't know. It's fun that you can just do that. Yeah, I'm gonna write my treatise on cell theory, and I'm gonna make it like you can make it like I don't know, in elegiac couplets, like.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think it does kind of bother me in a way that, so in my field, like, in the the field I was trained in anyway, the analytic
Sure.
tradition of philosophy, the mode of like communication is the journal article, right? It's a journal article. It's supposed to be very logically, you want your thought process to be put forward in a very logical fashion.
Right.
Um,
Point, thought, period,
Right.
publish.
Right. And then, in the continental tradition, it's more of a like a tome, more of a giant volume.
Yes.
To do. But like, I do think there's value in like a literary like way of doing philosophy, or like I think philosophy and literature do have a lot more in common than like I think the English speaking.
I agree. Yeah.
Often think about. I think they tend to think of it as more of a science, kind of like the classicists we've been talking about. And like, So yeah, I mean that you get some of this, I think, with some French philosophers, so Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, where they wrote
Yes.
both philosophical treatises, but also like more creative works that contained philosophical points. Whereas you contrast it with someone like the English philosopher Iris Murdoch, who she did write. She was also a novelist, and she wrote good novels, but she thought of herself her philosophy and her novels were like very separate in her mind, and
Right.
she didn't think she was conveying like truth with her novels, which
Right.
she was trying to do with her philosophy, and that's kind of a split-mindedness that I think we've probably inherited.
It's hey, props to Ayn Rand of all people. Never thought we would be saying something positive about Ayn Rand on this podcast, but yeah, the one of the worst women of the 20th century. But she credit where credit's due. She did her philosophy in novel form. Not good novels.
I've heard her.
They're torture to read.
I've heard her fiction's bad to read. I actually haven't.
It's not good. I've read just a smidge, and I'm like, yeah, that's enough for me. It's not good, but yeah.
It's funny. There was this was a while back, but like, I think it was these emails or something. Anyway, I kept getting these ads or emails or something from like I guess it's the Ayn Rand, one of those Ayn Rand institutes or something. And they were just begging me. They were begging me to read this book, and they're like, "Here's a free copy. Just please read it." And it was just the
Isn't that kind of altruistic of them? Isn't that kind of altruistic? Very not objectivist of them.
It was the most hilarious thing to me because it was like, I mean, it feels like Mormons knocking on your door. Like, have you heard the good news? Like, have you read Ayn Rand? Like, please read this. This is a spiritual, like, it felt like a cult in a way. I mean, I downloaded the book because it's a free book. I'll take it, but I haven't bothered to read.
Was it the Fountainhead?
I think it was the Fountainhead. Yeah,
they usually the one that they like to knock down.
They give away free copies because they're desperate for more people to convert to objectivism.
I wonder why
I'd rather convert to Christianity personally.
I wonder why more of them don't like try to beat down the door about Atlas Shrugged. Because like I guess probably because they assume more people have read it because like it's on a bunch of high school reading syllabi, but nobody reads those. So I still have not read Atlas Shrugged, although I don't think it was on my syllabus. Come to think of it, but yeah, I mean I don't know. It's very lost my train of thought, but I was in a similar position a few years ago. I went to a libertarian convention to see a debate that I was between a couple of people that I'm familiar with. I thought it would be interesting, and like it was because it was a libertarian convention. The Ayn Rand Institute supported them, I guess. And like after that, they had my email, so it was just like every week I was getting some shit. I'm like, I'm not downloading it. You can't make me. I will not download the Fountainhead. I can read that online without downloading anything, and you can't stop me. I will never give you the satisfaction of that click.
Well, the thing, I mean, I don't know. I downloaded it because it was free. If they'd asked me to pay for it, it'd be like, hell no, I'm not paying money for that garbage.
Right, but I bet they're keeping stats on those clicks.
If it's a free copy, I don't care.
I bet they're keeping stats on those clicks, though. In my head, this is a huge victory for me. My refusal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, Ayn Rand also, maybe we mentioned this last podcast, and I know we're getting away from classicists here, but Ayn Rand also did have a relationship with Friedrich Nietzsche's works.
Yes, she did.
I think she misunderstood him in pretty much every possible way.
Really?
But she did think of herself as like influenced by him.
Yeah.
She does allude to this idea of like the Ubermensch or the Superman.
Yeah.
For example. And there's is it the Fountainhead or and because isn't there like there's some one novel she wrote about some just like asshole that's just like I'm gonna do what I want and I don't care. I forget which one that was, but
I couldn't tell you. Atlas Shrugged is the one where, like the government is communist, so it taxes people. And this causes the downfall of society because all the great captains of industry, real heroes, decide they're going to go on strike, kind of, which is a very stupid way of understanding how human society works. But imagine my shock, Ayn Rand. But
yeah, well, I mean, I think like Nietzsche would. I think he would just be laughing at these objectivists because like he's against like one thing Nietzsche's allergic to is like the herd mentality. He's
right,
allergic to
yeah,
like like he was a member of no party kind of person, and
yeah,
he looks at if you were to look at these people like begging others to read the Fountainhead or whatever, like he would be like, oh, you're a loser. Like this is
right,
not you're not the higher man. You're stuck in this slave morality. And,
yeah. I agree. Yeah, which I guess is kind of ironic because you're saying Nietzsche would have hated Rand. I mean, Rand hated libertarians, and like one of the main avenues for objectivist thought still getting followers is that them following around libertarians.
all right, yeah.
They're always hanging out, being like, "Hey, yeah, come read the Fountainhead, woo."
Um, yeah. Well, um, I don't know if you had more notes you wanted to go over. I know
Um,
we've been kind of
yeah, we have
going off
veered
topic.
far away from Nietzsche, but that's beautiful. We're truly getting very classical here. We're like Marcellinus. We're doing our what's it called, the bejeweled form, where you interweave so many ekphrases that it's actually like people come to read your books for the ekphrases rather than the actual subject of the book. Um, that's another form of literature that I think has been tragically lost. I think it's fantastic that he'll just drop sections about like he's like, yeah, so this all this stuff happened in Lydia. In Lydia, there are lions. Let's talk about lions, and then go on for like 4 pages about lions. Like that's awesome. Why can't we do that anymore? Why do we have to be so rigidly focused on subjects? People just need to think, man. Anyway, um, but we're returning to those beautiful classical roots. Um, let's see. Other thoughts about Nietzsche, Vilimovitz. Yes. So he attacks Nietzsche's fundamentals. Like he he attacks him like on the grounds that he's basically saying Nietzsche doesn't understand Greek literature on a fundamental level. Like Nietzsche calls Homer a single being and a self-absorbed dreamer, an Apollonian naive artist, um, which uh, is a questionable characterization of Homer. I think. I mean, we barely know anything about Homer, the man, but this made Vilimovitz very angry. He says Mr. In, and that's how he addresses Nietzsche throughout most of the book. He doesn't call him Dr. Nietzsche. He doesn't, because Nietzsche is by this point a practicing professor at the University of Basel. And he refers to him as Mr. In or just In the entire book. I mean, it's, or the entire article, rather. And he says, Mr. In's lack of familiarity with Homer reveals itself still more clearly in his views about ancient Greek literary history. Homer is for him single being, self-absorbed dreamer, Apollonian naive artist, and Archilochus, in connection with whom scholarly research has allegedly discovered that he introduced the folk song into literature, um, because Vilimovitz considers that his argument is that like elegy didn't was never musical, which I'm actually not 100% sure that's true, but um, yeah, typical overconfident early classicist. um, really, that's all I have to say on that part. Um, uh, he also takes aim at this guy, Mr. Roda. I don't really know a lot about him personally, but he also comes up. But he's important because he, along with Wagner, writes a big response to this piece. And I think it's interesting. I don't think Nietzsche actually like writes a major response to this article. It's Rhoda and then Wagner who comes back for his number one fan, the goat himself. But um, uh, later and then yeah, later in life, he returns to this to Zukon's philologia. Um, and he says he was right to repudiate In's uh, quote rape of historical facts and all historical method unquote, which is an interesting statement. I don't really know what to say of that. It's just like more of his like weird moralizing about this. Um, and then, but he also moderated himself a little bit, saying he didn't realize at the time that Nietzsche and his friends were attempting to do something not strictly scientific. I don't know how you could read the book and not know that. Like, Nietzsche makes that very clear from page one, but, at least as clear as Nietzsche makes anything. But, yeah, I don't know. I find his excuse making kind of weak, to be honest. Um, that's pretty much it, really. That's kind of all there is really to say about it. I think it's relevant to us now. I think to look at just because it tells us a lot about where the field has gone and where it's going. But yeah,
And it makes us think about the in broader picture here, like what is our relationship to literature? What is our relationship to history? What are the values of these pursuing these fields? As you said, I think I really like what you said about the scholar versus the humanist and that sort of ongoing distinction.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I appreciate you doing all this research.
Wasn't really a whole lot. I mostly just like quote grabbed through Nietzsche and Wilhelmovitz. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty fun to go through personally. It's something I've heard about for a long time, and I just had never like really dug into it. So,
well, now we have. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been good talking with you. And I suppose we'll be back next week with what exactly? I mean, I don't think we've.
I don't think we picked yet, but we'll come up with something. It'll be different from Nietzsche this time.
Yes.
We've had our fill of Nietzsche.
Fortunately, we will be doing something other than Nietzsche.
All righty. Well, take care, everyone.